this session, I want to talk about how in coaching we need to help create a powerful force of change for our clients. Because one of the reasons, not the only reason, that people fail to deliver against what they wanted to get to, their vision, their ambition, was because it wasn't important enough. You know, it just came too difficult to do it, and they weren't prepared to push through the difficulties because the goal wasn't powerful enough for them. So we really need to work first before we start opening up to the change to really create a powerful, unstoppable force for change to overcome the natural inertia to that change. So some of the things I do in the coaching. One of the things I do is I really want to dig behind their whys, of what they want to do. Because people say, oh, I want to get this. And I do, what's called the 5 W's. You may have heard of it. So they'll start there with like, oh, I want to get this. And so why do you want to get that? What does that do for you if you get that? And then they say something else and they say, okay, well, I'll do that. So I want to get promoted. Well, why do you want to get promoted? Well, I want to get promoted because it'll give me more money. And what else? It'll give me recognition. It'll give me status. It'll give me, and what else will that do? It'll give me the opportunity to create powerful change in the organization. And what else will that do? Well, it'll help me get me another job or whatever it happens to be. And so the more we move up, the more we get up to a point that we get what is the real driving reason they want to get what they want to get. And then we can then start saying, now we've identified that, let's find the best strategy in there, because maybe the strategy you just outlined isn't the best way of getting it. There's something else, but let's understand, what are you really looking for? And that really leads me onto another model I use, which is the fundamental human drivers. And there are other versions of this, so I'm not trying to say this is the only thing, but these are what I see to be some of the key drivers that we as human beings have. And very often we're going to come back to some of these because this is what life's really about. So we have love and connection, our fundamental need to feel loved, to love other people, to feel connected. And I've often put these into sort of tension points, because very often when Jung first developed this, he talked about the tension points, and we struggle between these. And there's this whole thing about, our need for significance, our need for individuality, our need for independence. So that's putting us together, that's pushing us apart. And then we've got a fundamental need, for certainty and for control. So we're the masters of our universe. And that is something that is a very powerful driving force. But then against this, we also have a need for variety and stimulation. If everything is ordered and certain, we get very bored, so we need to have some of this as well. But we have too much of this, we miss that. And then we have the classic one, survival versus procreation. And we have the need for personal growth and our need for inspiring growth in others. So understanding what is the real driving force in us and linking it to one of those helps to really leverage it and get it up to another level. And then I do something else which I call the Dickens approach, based on the Christmas Carol. The idea being not so much Christmas past and Christmas present and Christmas future is, imagine 5 years time and you're still doing what you don't want to be doing. What's that going to cost you in terms of your health, your spirituality, your finance, your relationships, etc., etc. Now go 10 years out. How much is that going to cost you in 10 years' time? How much is that going to cost you in 15 years' time? And then now come back and say, imagine right now you have what you wanted. How would that be for you? And then go 5 years out. How much will your life be better if You have that in terms of, you know, your relationships, financial, your career, your, you know, all those other things I just listed. Now go 10 years, now go 15 years out. And that, as Anthony Robbins talks about, locks in it becoming a decision. It becomes from being a want to being a must. One of the other exercises I do is I'll create an obituary. You know, I'll say, right, write your obituary. Imagine you passed away. What do you want to be remembered for? What's your legacy? So now we're getting to like, I want to leave a mark. I want to be remembered for this. And so now we are really creating some powerful anchors to make something, I've really got to do this stuff. And then I talk about their identities and values. Who will you become if you do this? Who will you not become if you don't do this? What are your values you are living by? And are you being true to your values if you don't do this? So we put a lot of stuff into this stuff. And then we try to sort of, you know, create some visualization, some way of bringing it to life. Be it a mantra, be it a song, be it a mood board. And I often encourage them to already be thinking of it in the I and the now. So I am a da-da-da. And it's in the now, because the more that we can bring that to life, and the more we can revisit that every day and remind ourselves, the more likely we're going to get there. Versus if it's just in a PowerPoint document locked away within your files. You don't want that. And then obviously, having done all that, we've got to get the action plan, you know? Otherwise it's just a dream. And that's where we lock it down with very clear milestones, with actually sort of metrics, you know, and then basically what I have to do is help hold you to it, you know, through the tough times as well as the good times. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of having someone witnessing you do that. You may think, yeah, I could do it myself, but you don't. The reality is you haven't got to where you want to get to now because you haven't had someone who's on the touch line with the stopwatch saying, I need you to do that again 5 seconds faster. That's what we have to do. That's actually what you're paying for, because we're going to get you across the line.